Hi, my name is Abigail Lally, project lead at the Culturally Diverse Hub. We've got two incredible guests here with us today, and we're going to be looking at Beyond the Monolith, Black Histories, Diverse Narratives. And this segment, we're going to be looking at racial justice and just your personal journeys with that as well. So, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Annette Morris, and at the moment I work as the project lead or the involvement lead for the Community Mental Health Transformation Programme, responsible for making sure that people with lived experience of mental health and carers are at the heart of the decision making along that process.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Nicole, and I am the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Officer at Talbot Together. And my main role within that post is to make the service more accessible for people from ethnically diverse communities, as well as other marginalised communities as well. And outside of my role as an officer, I'm also an anti-racism trainer and race equality lead for consultancy delivering training across many different sectors in many different organisations.
I think for me, it goes back to when I was a child and getting to a point in childhood where I suddenly was awoke by racial injustice. Before that point, I felt as if I'd been oblivious to it. I had no idea of this racial injustice until one day I heard about the Ku Klux Klan. And I think I probably was about maybe 9 or 10 at that time. And Roots, the film, had shortly come out on TV, and everything was coming, felt like everything was coming all at once. This idea that all this injustice is happening in the world and it's targeted at me. That was a big shock. You know, I took that, I felt like I took that quite badly as a young child, and it made me feel really instantly like an activist. I felt like my activism started before I probably was 10 because of the way that I felt I had to protect myself and my integrity and my dignity as a Black female in this society that was so against who I was. So yeah.
So we're speaking about a particular person?
Yeah, just person or a moment in time.
Or a moment in time. So for me, in terms of what gave me the motivation to be more of an activist was, I mean, I say it's seemingly obvious, but everyone's journey is different, but it might seem a little bit cliche as well, but definitely the pandemic. I mean, the passing of George Floyd, that really caused me to shift and change my purpose in life ultimately. My experience of racism, being born and raised in the UK in the north of England, in a Black family, I've always been made aware of racism. It's been, it's that story that's been told. You have to be aware of who you are because the world will treat you differently. But for me, I didn't really fully acknowledge or accept racism because to me it was just so ridiculous. How can a person treat another person so differently based on the colour of their skin, and all these inequalities can come off the back of it? Like, we're human. Like, it's just such a ridiculous thing when you really simplify it. So, but it wasn't up until I was forced to look at it head on with the passing of George Floyd plus COVID together. That's what really was the catalyst for me to say, you know what, I might not have caused this problem and I might not be able to fix it 100%, but I can definitely contribute to making that difference for myself, my peers, and those that do come after me. And to honour those who have come before me as well. So yeah, it's an amalgamation of many things, but I feel like definitely 2020 was when I was, pushed out there and made sure that I had to do what I felt was needed.
Yeah.
I think as well for me, I grew up in a time when the American Civil Rights Movement was happening, and we were hearing all these tales of terror for Black people in America. We were listening to Martin Luther King. We were hearing about what they were actually trying to do, and that motivated me to say, well, this isn't just happening where I am. This is happening from a global perspective. Wherever people are who are of colour, where they're a minority, they're suffering in some way because of that. So that, all of those things, I think, amalgamated, enabled me to feel that this is the right journey, the right path for me to be championing these things and to be always focusing on justice.
Yeah.
Because there's too much injustice and we don't deserve that.
Just picking up on what you said about being awake or working at the age of 10, that's a very long time.
Yeah.
What impact has that had on your mental health and yourself as well from 2020?
It has had an impact. I can't deny, because it's set fear and worry into my everyday. So if I'm walking down the street alone at night in an area where I know I don't know, I worry. If I walk past a white guy, I worry. So those are very simple examples, but it's affected me in a way that it's made me realize that I've got a fight on my hands, and a battle every day is a battle to feel, what's the word I'm looking for? Just to feel like you are somebody, to feel like you have a right in this space, to be always fighting for that. That takes a lot away from a person. And I think it inevitably has an impact on your mental health, on your physical health. So, a lot of the statistics that we hear about, and we hear about these inequalities that happen, all this evidence is there. These things are happening because there's deep-rooted trauma that has been happening for centuries to people, that's been passed on and passed on. And because of that trauma, we're feeling that every day. It's like it's in our DNA, and we can't sometimes not feel it. That for me has been my journey, and I've had happy times. Life is great sometimes, but the reality is I've had to share that story with my children. I have 3 sons, and when they were growing up, I had to make them aware of the journey they might go on, in fact, that they would go on, because the perception of them in society, because how they've been vilified, how they've been sexualized, how they've been, all of these things aimed at them, targeted them, and prevented them from having a normal life. So they're constantly looking over their shoulder or worried when they see a blue light. All of these things are there all the time. So it has an impact, whether we want to accept it or not.
No, definitely. And when you were speaking there, it just reminds me of, and there is a name for this, it's called ultimate black fatigue. That's what it is. And there's a book on it, and the statement underneath the title, it says how racism erodes the mind, body and spirit. So it's not just those acts of name calling, even those microaggressions in the workplace. It's that fear, that constant anxiety of what racism may come and what impact it may cause. I don't have any children, but you telling a story, that fear of your children leaving the house. Yes, everyone cares about their children, but racism on top of that. Exactly. As women, the health service, healthcare, it's every day, it's a real life nightmare. Those statistics, and it's something that happens even in our group chat as young women. We see those mortality rates of mothers, 5 times more likely to die in childbirth and pregnancy than their white counterparts. Mental health, yes, it is. We have to acknowledge it and make sure that people are aware that this racism thing is not just one interpersonal, it's everything. Yeah. And we have to, what I always promote is rest for our people, time just to switch off. We deserve it. We've been working hard for hundreds of years, breaking our backs, and we're allowed, to take that break. Yes, we're doing this work, but we're allowed to rest as well at the same time. And, think about our mental health. You can't pour from an empty cup. Totally. Definitely.
Totally
so,
with that.
How do you rest? That's an interesting concept, because 100% with that as well, because it takes a massive toll, not just even mentally, but physically as well, like you mentioned. Absolutely. So how have you navigated that? Yeah. What does rest look like to you?
Yeah, so one thing, and I know it's a lot for our community, we have to learn how to do it. It's a battle, to switch off. It's not something that comes naturally. For me, it is a choice. I am very fortunate, I try and be positive, that I'm able to do my work and get paid for the work that I do in terms of tackling inequalities. Not everyone has that opportunity or that privilege. So I know that at 5 o'clock, when I've done everything and done all the training and told people about racism, I allow myself to switch off and say, you know what, I've done my work for today. And if if there is something happening on the train, on the bus, and there's an altercation, and yes, I can step in, but I don't always have to educate people 24/7, 365. Yes, I could make a difference, but I've made a choice to make my difference 9 to 5 with other people and get paid for that and get compensated for that, because it is an emotional toil. I don't think I could ever get paid enough for what I do, but I do what I do because I care. And yeah, that is how it's a choice, and it has to be very militant, cutthroat, and very so almost taking the emotion out of it, because if I have to be switched on all the time, I would never switch off. So yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah. I think for me, rest has only started to come recently. In my world, rest isn't often an option because there's always something going on. And I'm of an age where I come from a time where there's a lot going on and a lot has gone on, and we've reached this point. I was watching a program about the Windrush generation the other day, and it was telling a story about one of the older gentlemen who had actually changed the law. And when I was watching it, I ran around the house and said to everybody in the house, turn on the TV, watch this, because I know they don't know. Yeah. I didn't know. And I felt like this is a part of our history that's missing from all the textbooks. It's missing from conversation, because if you don't know what you don't know. And it felt empowering, learning that about the fact that this person who came before me was fighting that fight that I'm still fighting. But because he was fighting it then, it's made it easier for me to fight it. And it just created that acknowledgement that thank you. I felt grateful to these people who come before me, and they'd suffered some things. When I heard their story, I think I haven't even experienced that. But you still felt that was necessary to fight for me, so that my experience would be improved. Because when George Floyd was murdered in the way that he was, it was devastating. But in my mind, George Floyd was one of many that had gone that way. I had seen so many images on the internet, people sending me things that I get to the point where I can't see it anymore. So when George Floyd died and it was on national TV, everybody saw it. In my head, I thought, this is going to make the penny drop. So many things happened at that point. I left the job at Val because it just felt like I can't do this here anymore. I cannot give so much to not really see the results. So I had to move, had to get away, because it kind of opened up another floodgate, because now everybody's talking about it. All this time we've been banging on your door and saying, this is happening to us. Why is this happening to us? Why is no one saying anything? Why are we not talking about it? Why are you not stopping it? Why are you letting these people get away with treating people like they don't matter? And we have to see that. And that creates trauma for us too.
Definitely.
So for me, rest has come recent. And I rest now in a way where when I finish work, I finish. I'll switch off. Even if it's been the most hectic day and I've had so much drama in that day, when I switch off, it's off. Because I've had to learn to do that. It's not come easy, as you were saying. It's really difficult. Yeah. But I've learned to do that for me, because when I've looked at other people who have been living a similar pattern of life, fighting the fight, to me, my sister-ins who passed away, because they were doing so much. They were just overwhelmed. And that overwhelms you physically, as we've said. It took its toll, and it took them. And I always think about that. It makes me really emotional talking about it, but I always think about that and think about how much we give. As Black women, I see you two young Black women coming through, and I love it because you're fighting the fight. But I don't want it to take that toll on you too. I want you to grow old gracefully and live pottering around your garden and be happy. You know, not be burdened with the stress. You know, so I feel like we still have a way to go, but we're getting there. You know, we're definitely getting there because we have a lot of power now, and we're using it well. So yeah,
I love that. You mentioned just that show you were talking about, looking back, and you not even knowing that, you know. I mean, we know it in theory. Obviously, lots of work has gone into the fact that we're even here today, and we can build on that. But I personally feel like we don't capture our stories enough, and so it gets lost. I just wanted to get your view on that. What do you think we could do as a community to try and safeguard some of those incredible stories, just stories of resilience, of just hitting the door and breaking it down and just like occupying space and making things happen? How do we give that to our next generation?
How do we do that? Well, I always believe in the power of the storytelling. I feel like as a people, as how we are, historically, we've always been big on community. And I think that needs to sort of come back more. Living in the Western society, living this life, sometimes that can be taken away from us. But we can pay homage by first paying homage to those who are close linked to us, our direct ancestors, our mothers, our fathers, our aunties, our uncles. If we talk about women, our grandmothers. And then that celebration of those who are around us, who have paved the way, I feel like that will naturally create a ripple effect for us to understand how, you know, these great people have done amazing things. Because ultimately, you know, the UK is not that big, and globally, 7 degrees of separation? So we might even be so much more closely linked to these great people that have done these amazing things than we actually realise. And it does start with that intergenerational link once again, because yes, people our own age, we can talk about certain things, but tradition, culture, memories are passed down through those who came before us. So it's really about rebuilding those connections. You know, when I think about, you've mentioned the Windrush generation, how they, you know, just came together, you know, and all of that, we've kind of lost that. Like finding spaces where we as a people can come together intergenerationally, that I feel that needs to be brought back, or even just find more space for that somehow.
I agree. I mean, I think that there's a lot more as a community that we can do collectively, and it starts with, for me, with coming together and acknowledging each other, because we all bring something into this space. We all bring something, you know, to the table in terms of how can we do this together collectively, and where do we go from here? And I think, you know, for me, I think it's about education and making sure that we do know these things, because it gives you a sense of pride. It gives you a sense of belonging, of knowing yourself, when you know the history from where you've come from, and why do I want to do these things? Why am I motivated? Why am I have this burning desire to focus on that? It's come from somewhere. And I think we need to understand that. We need our children and our children and our children to understand that, so that it continues to be a thread that runs through us, because we as a community sometimes forget how great we are, and how from greatness we've come. And we lose that, and we lose sight of that in the society that we live, because we're so trodden down often in society. So we forget that greatness. And I think educating and making sure that that's remembered, we don't forget. We always acknowledge the greatness that we've come from. And, you know, we are massive, you know, and we can do so much as a people collectively together. You know, I always say this, that unity is strength, because if we're not together, you know, I think about the penguins, the emperor penguins in the Arctic, and how they work together. If they didn't do that, survival would be impossible. You know, so think about how nature shows us these messages. It gives us these tips and tricks on how we can do it better. We often don't listen. But I feel that we have an opportunity now as a nation, as a people. So many things have happened. You know, you mentioned George Floyd. There's so many things in history that we could call on that have been a catalyst to move us forward into another space where we're still fighting for things, but we're now living in that space where it's been acknowledged and we've moved on. So we can look back and reflect and say, yeah, we've achieved. I think that's that's a great thing.
Yeah, just to build upon what you said when you were speaking, 3 African principles or proverbs actually came to mind. So you spoke about a lot about looking back. You know, we all have, the answers are already there. So principle of Sankofa, you know, looking backwards so we can move forward, know where we've been. You spoke about moving together. The proverb that goes, you know, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. And the third one was, you know, the young person, they may have the strength and the speed, but the elder, they know the way, you know. So all of them things, but I've gone back. It's already, what you've said and what we need to move forward is already there. And we just have to, you know, find it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And use it to our best ability because we have it already. It's like those jewels that we think we're poor, but we're rich.
In your personal history, how have you navigated the complexities of systemic racism?
Wow.
I know it's a heavy question, but just looking back at your own journeys, how have you navigated it? Because you're in the system. You've talked a little bit about the work you do.
Yeah, I would say I'm still finding my way. You know, how have I navigated? I've just had to just get on and go. Sometimes before I had a limited level of awareness of what systemic inequalities, what systemic racism was. I understood racism to be more in your face, overt, or, you know, the microaggressions that you see. But with the heightened knowledge that I have, and I see what systemic racism actually is, I don't think I have navigated through it. I think I've just had to just get through it and just be as resilient as possible. That's resilience. Having that shared experience with others, unfortunately, knowing other people, you're not going through it alone, makes it that little bit easier. And it's a really good question. How have I navigated through it? I feel like, just like all of us that we always have as a people, we've just managed, we've just got by, we've just had to fight. We might not know the way, but we just take one step at a time, and hopefully, you know, we're still here, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it, because you kind of do that. You figure it out as you go along, because life's journey is about survival, and every step we take, we're learning something, and then we're fixing things according to that learning, and we're going again to that next stage, and we're fixing it again in order to get to the next stage. It's like building a bridge as we're going through life, so that we can always come back and go where we're going. But I think that it's difficult to navigate your way through life where racism exists, because it forever knocks you to the side or changes your path, even if you didn't want that to happen. And so you're always having to reinvent and reevaluate, or it tends to knock you to the point where you either become angry and black or cynical and black. And none of those two narratives play out well in society, because they're both rejected. So it's hard to navigate your way through the path of racism without it impacting on your decision making, your attitude, your angst, the way you speak to someone. All of those things are affected by that. So we're constantly navigating, even down to the code switching, when we're in certain spaces and we fix ourselves differently in order to accommodate the environment. These things are traumatizing, because we're constantly having to do them. And these are things that force us to have to navigate our way, because we go into a space knowing already, if I'm the only black face in this room, I know there's perceptions of me. So if I say certain things, people might go silent because they don't know how to respond to me. And all of those experiences we experience all the time, you know, and it's that for me is hard to do, but we're forced to do it. So it makes us tough and strong, but it also weakens us in another way. You know, it takes something away from us. So yeah.
Gosh. How do we encourage others to engage with the fight, which is a difficult thing because a lot of people disengage to protect themselves, which I completely understand. You have people not wanting to even go into the system and just stay away from it. I mean, I believe that you have to engage with it for anything to change, because the system's going to do what the system does. It's still going to go on anyway. But yeah.
I agree with that, what you said there. But I find what we're dealing with is a history of mistrust in the very system that has been set up to not function on our behalf. So there's a lot of that going on within people. And I think people find it very difficult to trust the system, to accept what it says, to not question everything. And I feel that makes life very difficult for anyone who's of a colour, of a culturally diverse perspective, or it lives their life from a culturally diverse perspective, to actually navigate their way through that world, to live in that world and to be confident in those spaces. I think it's difficult to do what we do and to be who we are, but we know why we're doing it, and I just think it's not because we like feeling the way we feel, if you understand what I'm saying. It's not that. It's because we feel that there's something in us, something in you that's saying, I need to do this, and something in me that says, I need to do this, and something in you that says that. So for whatever that's whatever we're doing and what's bringing us to that space where we're deciding this is how we have to live our lives, everything that's going on around us is going on anyway, and it's not going to change unless we put ourselves in there to change it. We have to kind of break down the barriers, kick down the doors. We've just smashed the windows and be noticed. Because if we're not doing that, and I'm referencing the riots, things like that happen in society because people need to be seen, and it's difficult.
No, it is.
If you're invisible, or feel invisible in society.
Yeah, definitely. So how do we engage people to...
How do we encourage people
encourage people, yeah. So for me, I've got a slightly different perspective. So earlier I spoke about rest. So I would say, it's natural within us for us to advocate for those who are similar to us, but it's really acknowledging that for me, it leads to a level of further inequity where we're having to solve a problem that we didn't create, and we need to be thinking about, yes, we're a big part of the solution, our lived experiences, our stories. We should be leading the way in terms of direction, but in terms of the labour, we shouldn't be bending our backs. Yes, it is support and help ourselves, but we need, some other labour coming from other resources and other places, because ultimately that's what we need, the manpower. Yes, we need to advocate for ourselves, but it's not for us to be lifting all the bricks, and doing all the work. And others watching on and saying, yes, you're so strong, you're so amazing, you're so resilient, wow, all these different things. It's like, you need a shovel, you need to get involved as well, because this thing is not going to come down on its own, and yes, we don't benefit from that structure of racism. Others do, but it's up to those who do to start to dismantle it if they really believe in equality and justice and fairness as well. So yes, there's a call out to people that look like me. If you want to join, but I'm kind of giving somebody else who doesn't look as much like me to get involved in that fight as well.
I totally agree with what you said there, because I think for me, there's an issue about people who become allies and the role that they play alongside us. My door is open to anybody of any colour, any creed, who understands and supports this issue and wants to ride alongside. You and I did some training to train the trainer the other day for a course in cultural competency and humility. And there's an ongoing issue with some of the ex-participants about whether white people should be able to deliver that training. And I'm on the steering group for that. And I was one of the people that said, well, actually, yes, they do. And the reason why they do need to is because, one, it'll educate them in a way they would not have been educated before. Their mind will be open, they'll be exploring and discovering, and that's a good thing. And not only that, but when they stand up in front of the group of people that they're training, they have to do that in an authentic way. So they've got to be believable, that they believe these principles and these ways of doing things and these ideologies that we have to be working towards. And I feel that that is, to me, is a way forward. I think how we, going back to the original question, how we might bring people with us. I think people have to decide themselves, because this kind of path of resistance or activism is not an easy path to be on. Yeah, it's challenging and it's not for everyone.
Yeah,
because you have leaders, you have followers. Society wouldn't function otherwise if you had all of one type. But I think how you encourage people is we educate, we give people the narrative, we show people the truth and don't hide. And this is where society comes into it. This is how it can help us to actually present ourselves in a way that people can get it and understand it and come on board and work with us, so that as time goes on, racism is diminished. It gets less and less because we've got more allies now than we've got foes out there, because people are getting it, they understand it. And I think for me, wisdom, knowledge and understanding as a collective thing enables, if we allow that to happen and we all gather the wisdom, the knowledge and the understanding of each other, it enables us to move forward. We've got a pathway that's broadened rather than a narrow pathway, which is where we're kind of at the moment, because we're going down a pathway to hopefully pass on that message that these things are wrong, and as a society collectively we need to see that so that we can put it right. And then the next generation isn't going to experience all the things I experienced. What they experience might be different, but it'll be less, and that fight will get less and less. So it no longer will be a fight, and that's, for me, that's the ultimate goal, that we're fighting for this, because it no longer needs to be a fight. We now have an understanding and we're working together.
I love that.
Yeah.
What does that labour look like? Not from our perspective, but from the system leaders, services. What is that labour for them to do? Yeah. What can they do more of to, I mean, the Culturally Diverse Hub's tagline says tackling racial inequalities, inequities in the city of Leeds. And you talked about hopefully in the future that reduces. How do we measure that progress? What can they do more of?
I think first of all, I know we've been shouting for many years, years before, saying these things are happening, but it is taking that time for them to actively listen, because with George Floyd, I'm sure with your experience, people was like, oh yes, let's start labouring, let's get the bricks, but they were running ahead of us, thinking, all these things, let's dismantle the structure of inequality. And it's like, do you actually know how racism impacts people that you live and work amongst? Do you actually know how it shows up? And so, beginning, it starts with that conversation. People listening to those very uncomfortable lived experiences of people that they've worked in the office with for 10 to 15 years, or their one black friend that they've been, oppressing throughout their whole friendship, but the friend has been putting up and shutting up because, it's not worth getting into it at that moment in time. So first, it's just acknowledging that you may have been part of the problem, perpetuating racism through assumptions and biases and all those different things, and just taking that journey of self-reflection. That's where it begins. And then we can start doing some work, looking at policies, looking at the numbers, challenging peers that look like themselves in the same peer group and affinity group when we're not in the room to defend ourselves. All those unseen things that are needed. And it needs to be genuine, because we won't be around all the time to check if they're doing it. But if it's genuine and it comes from a good place, then we can start from there. And hopefully, like I said, in our lifetime, we will be able to move forward.
Yeah, I feel positive that we will, because there's people like yourselves, and you're young still, and you're contributing in a way that's powerful. So I feel that we are on a journey and the train is moving a bit faster now. You know, I think when we look back at the Windrush generation and some of the people that came here when the Indians came here and the Pakistanis came here, when those people came, and it was around 50s and 60s, that was a really, really challenging time for a lot of people. So when you hear about some of those stories, that was devastating. I don't know how you lived through that. And the people, you know, when you think the way that people felt and they were comfortable in their racism, we are far away from that now. Mm-hmm. You know, when we reflect and look back, all that work wasn't for nothing. You know, it was definitely for something, and it was hard to probably see it while you're in it, chugging along. But when you can look back and reflect and think, you know what, we've come a long way. There's been so many things that have improved that, you know, you and I probably wouldn't be where we are now had it not have been for all of those things. So we have to keep going. We have to keep doing this. I think it's too important not to keep on that same journey, and understanding that, you know, this is all part of the bigger picture. You know, we're part of a bigger history, you know, where those people who are coming on board now and learning and understanding, and that might not look like us, but you're now willing to come on board and understand and listen and hear and be genuine about that. Because I think you're absolutely right. If they're not genuine, if that's a disingenuous act, it'll be exposed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They won't be able to, it's too difficult to pretend, because we're so sharp. Our radar in picking up,
Yeah.
you know, we're too sharp. So, you know, we'll see it. You know what I mean? So unless that's a genuine act of acknowledgement that, you know what, I'm hearing you, I'm actually listening. And what you said about active listening, the next step to that is active action. You know, this is where we are now. We're pushing for action. So, okay, we've been saying this for years. There's evidence written down all over the place you can see about these injustices. Where's the action to actually be doing something about it? Because we've talked forever, you know, and the talking needs to, you know, move towards something. And I think that's why we've seen change, because people have been constantly pushing the goalpost a little bit further and saying, no, okay, we've got here now. What's the next step? You know, we can't just accept this because this is just second best, or it's still not quite there. Because when we look at our world, there's still that level of inequality, you know, and looking at all the different parts of society, still there, you know. So how do we level up? And regardless, I see this issue of minority, how you perceive a minority is based on your bias and your discriminatory practices, because that person is still a person, the same as you. So whether they're a small number should have no relevance to the way they're treated. They're people, you know, and that's where society needs to get to, for me, where it's equitable, that everybody's treated accordingly until we're all on a level and we're all treating each other as equals. Because until we get to that place in society, we'll always have these inequalities constantly fighting against. And, you know, but we are getting there. I really do feel we are.
And definitely, to one thing that I forgot about, but to build upon, like, what does labour look like? Labour also looks like money, you know. You know,
investment.
It will, how much you invest in something, these equality initiatives, how much money you put into this time, not just money alone, but time, energy and resource, will show how much you care about something. You know, money isn't everything, but it talks. It definitely does.
Well, if you think about it, you're absolutely spot on, because where there's money in society, things happen.
Things change, things move.
You know, people do stuff. So if that was invested into us, things would happen. You know, things would get done because we've got money behind us, but we don't get invested in. You know, and that's another big kind of gap in the whole issue of inequality. how, Black organisations are funded, how Black businesses are supported, all of that kind of thing, we're still struggling with.
Yeah.
I remember my mum telling me the story of when her and my dad came here in the early 60s and wanted to get a house. They went to the local housing, at the time, Leeds City Council housing office, and were told, we can't give you a house. We haven't got enough for our own. Off you go. So my mum and dad had to find an alternative. That you hear about this generation of Caribbean people who are homeowners. The reason why they're homeowners, and they've been homeowners for the last 70 years, is because other than that, they would have been homeless. They had no other choice but to purchase their own home. And later on, down the line, that became an issue. How have all these Black people got to own their homes? Because at the time when my mum and dad bought their first house, I think they said it cost £1,500 or something like that.
It's a lot of money for back then, but
Do you
I
know
wish
what
it
I'm
was that
saying?
price
I
now.
wish it was that price now, but do you see what I mean? That the way society forced people to have to live. Do you know what I mean? And they were able to be homeowners for the whole of their working life, and still are. So I think that it just says something about society's shifting and moving all the time, but who is it benefiting the most?
Thank you so much for being here today. Last question. What advice would you give to your younger self?
I think I'd tell myself it's all going to be okay, because I remember when I was younger, I used to worry about getting older. I'd worry about the responsibility of living in a racist world. And I think I would tell myself, you're going to be all right. It's going to be okay. You're strong enough.
Yeah, it's a very powerful question, and I think I would say something very similar. Just give them reassurance, I think it's normal for us to always think that we're not good enough, we're not doing enough, we're not at that right stage in life. But I would definitely say, you're doing just fine. Keep going, keep doing what you're doing, and just enjoy the journey. Just live for the moment. Well, a lot of the times, outside of racism, we're just so keenly focused on the destination. I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to achieve all these great things. But we forget to ultimately look out the window and enjoy the trip. So I tell my younger self, just enjoy, live in the moment, live for now. And yes, there's so many issues in the world, but there's so many great things, so many great experiences to have as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just enjoy
Love
it.
that. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody that stuck with us through this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.